Aaron's lack of effective power to restrain the followers of the calf by gaining mastery over it as Moses did is a wisdom from God made manifest in the created world so that God might be worshipped in every form. Well, that sounds very different from Moses' teaching. Yes, Faisal?
I'm just wondering, no wonder Ibn Arabi had so many enemies.
Yeah. I mean, this is unbelievable, because you'll see it's astonishing, the sublimity, how profound and delicate the meaning. Like, you have to really think about this. It's so interesting. But it very much, throughout the Fusus, you have this problem, which is that the people, including after the time of the Fiqh al-Akbar that I brought to your attention, you still have the emphasis is on transcendence. Even in Fiqh al-Akbar, I think you'll agree, they reject very much, they sort of push back against the tashbih, you see? And they only say that the tashbih will be addressed in a manner bila kaifa, without asking how God could have a hand, without asking how he could be established on the throne. You just hear that there's some immanence, and you don't tackle that, you stay away from that. But the Sufis, they were much more courageous and much more bold in their interpretation of that, and they said that the names are going to manifest completely into the world of form. And Ibn Arabi throughout the Fusus gives his explanation of this. But what we'll do is we'll turn just line by line. We'll stop some more on this line, but what I want to do is add the Persian, because those Persian speakers, I think they will be happy to hear the Persian account of this. Huh? So, so what I just read to you in English, یعنی ایره از هارون گپ میزند، نه؟ یعنی عدم تأثیر منع هارون در بازداشتن ایشان از عبادت عجل و عدم تسلط او بر ایشان چون تسلط موسی علیه السلام حکمتی بود از حضرت الهی ظاهره در وجود کونی تا حق سبحانه عبادت کرده شود در صور اقوام. Well, what exactly is Aaron's wisdom? And we find out it's a wonderful, mysterious wisdom, which is the wisdom of not interfering, and that in fact God may have a purpose, and he reveals what was the purpose. He reveals what the purpose of staying out of the way. What was the purpose of staying out of the way? That he just explained. Yes.
So Moses could deal with it.
I'm sorry?
So that Moses could intervene.
Well, there's that, but he actually he was explaining a metaphysical thing. What was it?
So that God is worshipped in every form.
Yeah, so that God would actually be worshipped in every form. Because he's about to broach a very strange doctrine, and he's using this story. Ibn Arabi is broaching this doctrine, and he's just introducing the doctrine by showing what happened. He's merely reviewing what happened, and he's saying, well, wait a minute, Moses went up there, what's wrong with Aaron? If he's the more eloquent, couldn't he have talked him out of it? Couldn't he have done, is it fear that works with these people? Maybe so. Maybe Moses comes back and they're scared. The guy comes down, his own brother's scared of him. He's so scared, what does he say? O son of my mother. Again, showing the feminine side, meaning the gentle side, just like with the people he dealt with gentleness. With his own brother, he said, "O son of my mother, don't pull my beard and my hair out." You see, because he sees he knows how wrathful, how angry his brother can become. So it's very interesting, huh?
But there's a physical change in Moses too that is quite profound, isn't there? Like he comes off the mountain and he's aged and he looks a lot different. He has an appearance change about him, doesn't he?
Well, he certainly has had a transformative experience, but in the Quranic account, we see him progressively growing in wisdom, and don't forget that the Pharaoh finds out through a prophecy that he will be deposed by an Israelite.
Yeah.
So he has all of these children killed, and Ibn Arabi and other Sufis explain that the spirits of all of those killed children, they accrue, the spiritual energy accrues to Moses, and Moses becomes very formidable as a consequence, becomes very strong. And when somebody is strong and they're not yet grown up, we all know what that means, huh? We see like in people or children or teenagers, they don't yet have the wisdom, but they have the strength. We all know what can happen from that. And Moses had to go through a developmental process where he had to grow up and become mature and develop the capacity to hold this wisdom. So by the time he goes to the Mount, it's a very sacred encounter, and it's a sacred law that he brings back, huh? That's accepted by the three traditions, huh? From this region. Now we continue, and again we can add questions for this, but we just continue a little bit further. So that God might be worshipped in every form. Indeed, even if that form disappears thereafter, it does so only after it has been, for its worshippers, clothed in divinity. So that every kind of thing is worshipped as divine or dominant, and every intelligent person can realize that this must be the case. So again, we'll go back to that. So that God might be worshipped in every form. Indeed, even if that form disappears thereafter, it does so only after it has been, for its worshippers, clothed in divinity. So that every kind of thing is worshipped as divine or dominant, and every intelligent person can realize that this must be the case. And before we do the question on this, we'll do the Persian, so that people who have better command of that language, they can hear what we're using. Khwarazmi, we're using somebody from Herat who wrote, he was from Khwarazm, but he lived in Herat, who wrote this commentary. تا حق سبحانه عبادت کرده شود در صور اکوان، و اگرچه این صور زائل شود و فانی گردد، از آن که ذهاب و فنای صور نمی باشد مگر بعد از تلبس به الوهیت نزد عابدش. So he's commenting on what Ibn Arabi has said. Okay, did any, again, indeed, even if that form disappears, it does so only after it has been, for its worshippers, clothed in divinity, so that every kind of thing is worshipped as divine or dominant, and every intelligent person can realize that this must be the case. He doesn't say must realize, but can realize. So just through the intellect alone, they should be able to realize this is the case. And I ask you, in our own civilization, do we not have a general understanding about people worshiping either money or power or position or some other divinity that could be from the instinctive center of the human being, like we would call that like a fetish? Or you see, there are many kinds of worship, many kinds of strange forms of going astray. Because wouldn't this normally be going astray, these things? But for this doctrine, it is the divine will that is causing this to happen. Of course, through his name, Mudid. You see, so Mudid, we normally think in a negative way, but as you'll see, Aaron doesn't think of it, and Ibn Arabi doesn't think of it in a negative sense. Yes?
So you'll probably cover this later, but my mind is thinking. So is this partially a lesson to give a contrast for later, for when Islam comes? You know, or the creed is La ilaha illallah, but this kind of gives a contrast. So now but they've had that before. I'm kind of thinking out loud. Like, is it or is it something like it's better that God be worshipped even if it was in a way that he would not want them not to be worshipped at all? Like,
yeah. Now you see, not long ago, I was sitting with a friend of Shakur's,
Yeah.
and this is Abdul Haq is his name, and he's a very wise, wonderful person who I've known for many decades. I always enjoy seeing him, and we're sitting at a cafe, and consider every time he says La ilaha illallah in English, because his wife is there, he's saying there is no deity, but it is actually the supreme deity. He's not saying there is no deity except for the supreme deity. He is saying La ilaha, there is no God illa Allah, except that it is Allah. Wow, that's certainly a shift of understanding, and is not uncommon to encounter among the Sufis. It's part of the same teaching that since there is no existence, since there's only one existence, therefore, how about Shabastari? Musulman gar bedanisti ki bud chist, bedanisti ki din dar bud parastist. That's got the book, was very much came under the scrutiny of the ulama of Iran, because he's saying that if the Muslim, meaning the Muslim, if the Muslim understood or knew what the idol actually was, he or she would know that there is religion in the worship of idols. And does anybody remember the verse that our Ustad quoted very often, that Shabastari quotes to defend himself here? وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ. Did Ustad quote this a lot? There is not a thing except that it worships God through itself, through its own voice, you see? So everything is praising God, and therefore there is no exception, as Ustad pointed out and the Shabastari pointed out. So everything, like every rose, is praising God, and they say, Shabastari says, and this statue, this idol, is also praising God because it is a thing, and therefore it must be praising God, because everything, there isn't a thing except that it is praising God, although you do not understand its praise. So this is a very interesting teaching and is very controversial, and so not surprisingly, after the scrutiny of the ulama in many places, the Gulshan-e-Raz was banned. It was banned for this line and for a few other lines like this, which the ulama decided was not acceptable and the book should be banned. Now in this case, Ibn Arabi is also banned in many countries and in many situations, and his book is burned. Now here, what we'll do, again, are there any other questions that have come up about this particular point? Because you brought up this one, is this before real Islam comes? And according to the Sufis, no, this is real Islam. Yeah. And at all times, you have both the notion that God is above all of this, And this is signified by the phrase Allahu Akbar. So Allahu Akbar is beyond any conception you can have, any knowledge you can have. So ultimately, God in his essence is far above what people say, is above what people are saying and what they are comparing him to, on the one hand. And on the other hand, the domain of tashbih, God says that even the servant can move me. Let's say in the hadith, God says through the nawafel, the supererogatory devotion of the servant, that I am moved to love the servant. And when I love the servant, I become his hearing and his seeing and so on and so forth, you see? So, anyway, there is not a thing except that it is praising God through its own voice. But you are not able to grasp its praise. So therefore you can't say, because God says you can't grasp its praise. Whether it's the leaf of a tree, a worm in the ground, its very existence is its praise. And this is the defense. Yes?
So I'm a little confused because it was clear before that the inanimate world, because of its contingent existence,
Yes.
is in the state of worship just by being.
Yes.
But what about shirk? And I can't make the.
Yeah. Well, this is where this is what they want. The very question they want us to ask is not instead of what about shirk, what is shirk?
Okay.
And is shirk the apparent idolatry of people, or is there a different shirk that people hadn't suspected? So another reason that Gulshan Eroz was scrutinized and banned in some places is because Shabbos says, "Bebaten nafse ma chun hast kafir, mashaw razi badin Islam zahir." We know this is the line has to be because the meter is hazaj. Yeah, so mufa'ilun, mufa'ilun, mufa'il. So بباطن نفس ما چون هست کافر مشو راضی بدین Islam ظاهر. Since it is our hidden selves which are the true idolaters, don't be so smug about this overt Islam of yours. See, so this is a line that is very offensive to the authorities, and it sort of addresses the question you're asking, that I'm trying to address. They definitely want us to ask, and they're provoking the question. In fact, it's a challenge to the individual, challenge to them. Shirk, those of you who aren't sure, I think every one of you in the English speakers, the people here tonight, what this means. Idolatry. Associationism really is what it means. Now, do you remember the quick definition I give to what God actually means by associationism? It is as though you were listening to someone speak and suddenly you saw their hand move, but you thought it was a spider or something. You thought it was something different from the one who was speaking, even though their speech and the movement of their hand came from the same mind. And Ibn Arabi says shirk is the height of ignorance because it is the mistaking of a thing for itself. Nothing in the cosmos is worshipped, however, except it is assumed for the worshipper. Meaning except unless it is assumed for the worshipper. A certain sublimity and enjoy a certain degree in his heart. Thus God is called the lofty in degrees and not lofty in degree, since he has made many degrees in one essence. This morning I was explaining to you how we have to realize that we are living in several domains at the same time. And the Sufi has become equipped, has enough focus and attention to bring appropriate behavior and understanding to whatever level is manifesting at the time, according to the doctrine of Kullu Yawmin Huwa Fi Shan. In every moment God is upon a new change, a new articulation. The servant feels the change, and they also will feel it in themselves through their own changes. So suddenly a person who is in Lahut may be drawn to another domain, or a person may enter Lahut through another domain, for example through Malakut, or they may see the power of the divine names in Jabarut. So there is an adaptive quality that the heart must develop. And this adaptation allows the person to simultaneously live in these different domains. Because God is manifesting, as he says, in these different domains simultaneously. And he is exalted in each of the domains. He never is abased or lowered by these domains. You see? So we will go and just read this in Persian. و عبادت کرده نشد هیچ چیزی از عالم مگر بعد از تلبس بر رفعت و علوی درجت نزد عابدش و لذا حق سبحانه و تعالی نفس خود را تسمیه و رفیع درجات کرد و رفیع درجات نخواند و عبادت کرده نشد هیچ چیزی از عالم مگر بعد از تلبس بر رفعت و علوی درجات نزد عابدش و لذا حق سبحانه و تعالی نفس خود را تسمیه و رفیع درجات کرد و رفیع درجه نخواند. The idea is, for example, if we see the sun reflected in a mud puddle, the sun is not lowered, is not made dirty, is not made, the sun itself is not perishable, even though the locus is perishable. See, that's what he was saying earlier. He was saying that remember he was talking about how God may appear in the manifestations, even though they're perishable. Remember the earlier line about this? Well, this is the sense of that. Yes.
So then, wouldn't it kind of boil down to then a person's particular perspective and understanding of it? So, for example, if somebody, an enlightened person, let's say, knew, and I know this, Sharia says no, and God says no, I wish to be worshipped only in this way, but let's say an enlightened person knew that God was in the table.
Mm-hmm.
And they were showing this adoration to the table because they knew that. And then there's somebody who shows adoration to the table and affection to the table, but they don't know that.
Yes, so this is Shabbastari's point, would be the one you are making now. So Shabbastari, when he's commenting on the line that I mentioned, if the Muslim knew what the idol really was, he would know there is true worship in idolatry. And he said this is for the person who understands that there's only one wujud, one existence, and it manifests everywhere. And don't forget that wujud would be the mother of all of the divine names. Like, for example, in the more common religious language, God does not talk about wujud. He talks about the Rahman. And it's from the Rahman and out of love that he creates all of the worlds. And we know that the Rahman has precedence over the other divine names. So we understand from this that any of the divine names, therefore, they can manifest anywhere at any level. And similarly here, as you say, doesn't there have to be knowledge of this? And Shabastari argues in lines further along that you have to, but he makes a very funny twist to this, and I'll tell you what it is. He actually is setting up the traditional and narrow-minded Muslim. He says, but if they don't see that divinity is in the idol, then they are in fact idolaters, and they are heathens, or we would say infidels, huh?
Yeah.
And you remember what he says next? He says, and you too, who think you are a good Muslim, and you don't see God's unity in the idol, you too therefore are an infidel. So he sets up the reader, like you're making a good point, that you would have to know that the idol is the locus, the place of manifestation for divinity. And Shabastari says that in the next line or two. But then he says, he's really after the narrow-minded person. He says, and therefore, just as that person's starting to feel happy that the situation is corrected, he says, and you too, if you cannot see God's presence in this statue, you too, therefore, based on that argument that you can't see it, therefore you too must be an idolater. Pretty interesting, huh? And pretty infuriating to the conventional, to the establishment. You see?
It sounds
Yes.
kind of upside down to me. It just, it's like it's got my brain stuck between gears or something like that. It just sounds kind of upside down.
Well, here it is. Here's the idea that there would be no world if it were not for God pouring existence
Sure.
into
Yes.
the possibilities.
Right.
Okay, the possibilities.
Right.
And I'm using that word deliberately because usually it's in Greek language it's the possible and the necessary. So I'm using that word in the plural because of the many essences, the individuals, and so forth. So you and I, we have no actual existence except the existence poured upon us by God.
Absolutely.
According to this idea.
Absolutely.
Now, but according to the Quranic line, there is not a thing. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. There is not a thing, anything, except that it is worshiping with its praise, worshiping God with its praise. The only thing is you are not understanding its praise. So we got that piece, we have this piece, and now we can understand that if you could see God if everything is praising God, then it has a form of worship, and it itself is God, because all of the praise goes back to God. He is worshiping himself. Everything is a locus of manifestation. And for the Sufis, very often the Buddha, by the way, the reason this is important in the culture is the word for idol is but, which actually are the Buddhist statues that they saw.
Hmm.
So when they went to Asia, and if you look on YouTube, you'll see I gave a talk called Sufism and Buddhism. I go into a lot of detail about this. And what you see there is they go to Asia and they ask the people when they conquer them, they say, why are you worshiping this statue? But when they get to the Buddhists, they say, oh no, you're quite mistaken. We would never worship the statue. Who would worship the statue? And he said, what are you doing with this statue? They said, this is a namuna. This is an icon that shows us how to sit in meditation. This is a form that shows us the posture, shows us the right way to sit in the meditation. And on this basis, they got the dhimmi status. You understand? Dhimmi means they were the people who were protected by the state, by the Muslims.
Mm.
So this was true. When you hear of the Ghaznavid, Sultan Mahmud and all of this, the Shikas, actually his father and his grandfather, they protected the Buddhists in his land, in Central Asia. And before they came to Afghanistan, and even when they got to Afghanistan, the Buddhists had protected status. The Hindus did not have protected status.
Wow.
Because the Hindus said, he said, are you worshiping the statue? He said, yes, we're worshiping the statue. And said, well, okay, break it, destroy it, you see. But the Buddhists, they didn't. They asked them, you see, they were told, remember how gentle, remember what I read to you from Hazrat Umar when the invasion of North Africa, he said to the troops, he said, you must respect the people, you must not kill anybody but soldiers, you must not destroy any crops. Remember? I read this to you guys in the New Year's address. And he said, and there will be people there. They are worshiping God and they are Christians. And they believe that they are worshiping God sincerely. He didn't say they are. He says they believe they are worshiping God sincerely. You will leave them alone. Now that's different from what we hear about today, isn't it? You will protect them even. You will leave them alone and you will protect them. The Christians who believe they are worshiping God correctly, they are saying, we believe in the Son of God, Jesus. You will protect them. This is Abu Bakr sending the troops off to North Africa. You see? So there's a great respect for these other traditions. Now, see, I want you to understand that the word commonly used both in Arabic and Persian, in Arabic it becomes bud with a D, but in Persian it becomes but with a T. And to this day, it's in all the Persian poetry, you see. So there's this idea that somehow the statue is conveying spirituality, but they had mastered aesthetics. They had hundreds of years to master a kind of aesthetic, and I'm sure you've seen Buddhist statues, how powerful they are. Am I right? Mm-hmm. So we can understand why this conversation is going on now. But but we take this conversation and we expand it. We expand it to have a broader meaning, and the broader meaning you were saying that it was perplexing, but it's not that perplexing. It's actually rather funny because the strict people are saying, no, this is idolatry, and they are worshiping the statue. And Abdurrahim says, well, but they would have to know, meaning if they knew they were worshiping the statue and God was manifested in it, then they are okay. But if they actually believed the statue itself was going to deliver to them, see the difference? Mm-hmm. Then they are mistaken. And Shabastari says, yes, they are mistaken if they don't see the divinity coming from the statue. Now he has some fun. Because you see what he's criticized. He said, because they don't see the divinity in the statue, so therefore they are idolaters. And you too, my brethren, who don't see the divinity in the statue, by definition, you must be an idolater. You see? You see the logic of that? So he sets them up.
So even if you can intellectually understand it, but can't see it from experience, you still fall into the category.
Even if you were a believer in the Quran and you understood verses like, there is not a thing except that it worships God. Mm-hmm. And worshiping God is a kind of mirroring. Don't forget, in the Islamic tradition, if I am moved to worship God, it is because God actually is inside of me, and it is the Spirit that is moved to worship. So this is another common understanding that we have to incorporate if we're going to understand the doctrine that he's getting at here. و حق در مرتبه الوهیتش معبود نمیگردد مگر به دانش ببخشید و حق در مرتبه الوهیت معبود نمیگردد مگر به ذاتش از آن که او معبود بالذات است همه ما سوارا و اما در مراتب صور کونیه معبود نمی شود مگر به واسطه سلطان هوا بر عابد و مگر به اخذ یا اخذ محبت آن چیز قلب عابد را چه همه اشیاء ممکنند و هیچ کدام را وجود ذاتی نیست. بازی تکرار میکنم که قسمتش که عبادت نکنیم مگر او را در درجات کثیره مختلفه که هر درجه عطا میکند مجالی از مجالی الهیه و حق در وی عبادت کرده می شود و اعظم مجالی که حق در او عبادت کرده می آید و عالی آن هوا هست کما قال تعالی افرایت من اتخذ الهه هواه پس هوا اعظم معبود است از برای آن که هیچ چیز عبادت کرده نمی شود مگر به هوا. دلچسب است نه؟ So he's making a very unusual interpretation of this line. Again, we'll go back to the English and then try to close the conversation for this evening, and we'll come back to it. Thus, he has ordained that none but he should be worshipped in many different degrees, and that each degree should become a context, or really a locus, a majali, a theater, become a context for the divine self-manifestation in which he is worshipped. The greatest and most sublime of these is passion, as he says, "Do you not consider him who has taken his passion as a god? It is indeed the greatest object of worship, since nothing can be worshipped without it, nor can it be worshipped without his essence." Now, to just let you know what we will cover next time, if we can, inshallah, is that in the same verse of the Quran, there's the line, God has caused him to err knowingly, caused him to go astray knowingly. Now, think about Hafez's line, Guftam ki bui zulfat gumrah alamam kat. Gufta agar bedani, if you had knowledge, Gufta agar bedani am uat rahbarayat, it would be your guide. So the Sufis interpret, he caused them to err knowingly, meaning he knowingly thought he could save them by having them go astray from the lost path they were on. It's a very interesting simplification of tonight's teaching, is people say, oh, I don't want to be those who went astray. Right? Right? Oh God, let me not be those who went astray. And God, according to the Sufis, and certainly according to their perception, is like, you mean you didn't know that you were already astray? So that if you were to go astray from having been astray, may not be such a bad thing. The big difference, huh? Like, I'm right, I've got the right religion, we're always right, they're always wrong, full speed ahead, just do all the right things, get a nice sofa, soft sofa, in paradise, eating the fruits, laying back. No, the Sufi say, no, this is wrong-headed. You are on the wrong path if you're thinking this way. And it is better for you if God should cause you to err knowingly. So we see a resonance in Hafez's line between knowledge, huh? Because you were asking about what are these names and how are they? You were specifically asking about Alim, weren't you? And Shakur. And in this case, what we see in Hafez's line, he's clearly linking, God is saying, cause him to err knowingly. Well, that's what he takes into his poem. Gufta agar bedani. If you knew, ilm, in Persian I mean, agar bedani ham uat rafaro. If you only knew, it would be your guide. Meaning the hair that you say are guiding you astray. This being guided astray this being lost would be your guide if you only understood. If you only, literally says, if you only knew, exactly like the Quran says, knowingly. As you know, I have not just the agenda of trying to show how flexible Islamic thought was once upon a time, but also how practical it was. Because I ask you, if you step out of the religious persona, which many people do the minute they walk out of the mosque, and other people do is when they get 2 miles from the mosque, then you're faced with life. You're faced with life, and life is full of mistakes. The question is, how should I deal with the mistakes in my life? How should I think about the mistakes in my life? In some cases, I should realize, because I should realize based on the harvest, should I not? And the harvest may take a season to know. It may not be known right away. And we can have so much this experience where we think we've met the wrong person and it turns out to be the right person, or we think we've met the right person and it turns out to be the wrong person, meaning whether it's business, friendship, anything like this. But the thing is, it requires conscience. See, because several times tonight the issue of authenticity, faithfulness to the meaning of the religion, like does this undermine the general ideas of the religion? It does not undermine those ideas. As I said earlier, we are talking about 2 prophets here, Moses and Aaron. And Moses has more wisdom, because in Quran it says Aaron is greater in age, Moses is greater in wisdom. But Moses in his personality has a strictness that we see exposed in the encounter with Khizr, for example. And Rumi positions Moses as being the person who is separating him from the servant. You may know the famous story. He says, I didn't send you to separate me from my servant, I sent you to join me to my servant. You see the very famous passage, huh? Az Chupam, that Bialvan. And it's very famous that Rumi is trying to say, because Rumi is like, you think he is a valley, a mountain, like one minute, see Moses is praised, another minute he shows the difficulty of that position. So whether it's Rumi, Shabastari, they're really worried about shirk-e haqiqi. You see, not shirk-e majazi. Shirk-e majazi is a very easy cover, very, very easy way to hide, meaning idolatry. The external sense of idolatry gives people a refuge from their own egotism, because they will lodge themselves there and criticize everyone, actually building a large idol, bigger and bigger by the day, by the week, and so forth, according to the Sufi viewpoint. And so this expansion of the self egotism of the self is regarded as very dangerous. And so they try to present alternative readings and teachings in in their poetry, in their texts, like in the case of Ibn Arabi, in a very consistent way to undermine the simplistic and reductionist understanding of the Quran, whereas the Quran, in fact, is very sophisticated. And Aaron represents the feminine, represents the gentle, represents the understanding, the accepting, and Moses represents the masculine, the organization, organized, strict. That's why he's able to guide the Israelites. They are really a difficult bunch. And you read their own scripture, and in great, great detail, we see the tribes fighting, we see them falling off, peeling off, all through egotism, through greed, through impatience. They are very human. They are really us. The Israelites, they are the human being. They are the chosen people, meaning we are the chosen people, everybody. We are chosen for a strange purpose. We are a paradoxical creature. And so the Sufis want to expose the paradox so that we can arrive at salamat, safety, security, and peace by understanding the self, understanding that a mistake or what seems to be going astray, we should examine and just always ask, am I hurting anyone? If it looks like I'm going to hurt somebody, I don't wish to take that gamble. It's not worth it. This is not a doctrine where I can afford to break a few eggs, meaning a few friends or something. This is not this kind of situation. This has to do with me and God, and involves my own relationship to the world and to other people, and in a manner where I can try to understand my relationship with God, I should realize that in fact I have been an idolater several times a day. And I should see how that happened to me. And now we have a new paradox. He says, I will forgive anything except idolatry. And then my answer would be, oh God, please let me be of those people that you bring a new people who you love and they love you. And also, you threaten a lot, but then we see that you forgive a great deal, you see. So we bring back to God his own statements about mercy, but this is not a doctrine about do whatever you want. That's the problem with this doctrine. A person might think they can do whatever they want. This is not the doctrine. So we have to distinguish that. Huh? Very good.